That is how Brian Hooker described the moment the woman he spent 25 years with disappeared into the black, shark-infested waters of the Bahamas. He didn't say she fell. He didn't say she was swept away. He said she bounced. It's a cold mechanical word, a word you use for a rubber ball, not the mother of your children. But here is the part that should make your blood run cold. While Lynette was gasping for air in the choppy wake of their boat, Brian Hooker didn't scream for help on the radio. He didn't fire a flare. He didn't even jump in. Instead, he waited 8 hours to tell a single soul she was gone. Welcome to the deck of the Soulmate, a 46-foot sailing sloop that was supposed to be a dream retirement but turned into a floating cage. Brian and Lynette were the sailing hookers, a couple that looked perfect on Instagram. All sea turtles, solar cooking, and sunset toasts. But on April 4, 2026, the filters vanished. The sun set at 7:40 p.m. By Brian's own account, that is exactly when the nightmare started. They were heading back from a day of drinking at Tahiti Beach and a dinner at the Abaco Inn. The wind was screaming at 20 knots. The water was a chaotic mess of whitecaps. And then silence. Brian claims the electric motor on their 8-foot dinghy was cut out because the safety lanyard was attached to Lynette's wrist when she bounced off. He says he threw a cushion. He says he yelled for an hour, but visibility was zero because the moon hadn't risen. Now think about this. Brian Hooker is a former Marine. He is a trained navigator. He knows these waters. Yet he claims he spent the next 7 hours paddling a hard-bottom boat 4 miles through a gale toward Marsh Harbor. While he was paddling, Lynette's lungs were filling with salt water. While he was paddling, the current was pulling her further into the abyss. He arrived at the boatyard at 4 a.m. He didn't call 911 from a cell phone. He didn't bang on hull after hull in the marina. He trekked through the bush and finally, 8 hours after the bounce, he contacted the police. But the silence didn't end there. Lynette's daughter, Carly, didn't get a frantic phone call from her stepfather. She got a voicemail. 24 hours later, imagine opening your phone to a recording telling you your mother has been at the bottom of the ocean for a day. Carly asked the one question the FBI is now obsessed with. How do you just lose my mom? The Bahamian authorities wondered the same thing. Within 3 days, Brian wasn't a grieving widower anymore. He was a man in a cell. Under Bahamian law, they can hold you for 48 hours. But the police saw something so disturbing, so inconsistent in his story, that they petitioned a magistrate to keep him for 96 more. They needed time to get onto the Soulmate. They needed to see what the sailing hookers were hiding behind those smiling TikToks. Because Brian told his friend Blaine Stevenson, in a call he didn't know was being recorded, that he was unable to speak for himself while detained. He was playing the victim. But while he was sitting in that cell, investigators were realizing that the Soulmate wasn't just a boat. It was a witness. You see, Brian is a tech geek. He spent years networking that boat with high-end sensors, thermal cameras, and satellite arrays. He thought he was building a state-of-the-art home. In reality, he was building a digital trap that recorded every move he made and every move he didn't make that night. The marine logic of "I just drifted for 8 hours" was about to collide with cold, hard data. And if you think the 8-hour delay is bad, wait until you hear what happened to the boat's GPS at the exact moment Lynette went into the water. It didn't just malfunction. It went dark. For 11 hours. The Soulmate was never just a sailboat. To the average person, it looks like a beautiful escape. But to a forensic investigator, it is a high-tech crime scene wrapped in fiberglass. Thanks to a tour conducted by Boat Snoop before the hookers ever stepped foot on deck, we have a blueprint of the trap. This vessel was kitted out with a suite of electronics that 99% of sailors never touch. We're talking about a FLIR system, forward-looking infrared night vision. Think about the weight of that for a second. Brian told the world he couldn't find Lynette because the moon had not risen yet. He claimed he was blind in the dark. But down in the cabin, he had a thermal screen that could spot a human head bobbing in the water from a mile away in pitch blackness. He had the eyes of a predator, yet he claims he spent an hour yelling into the wind while his thermal cameras sat idle. Why didn't he use the tech he was so proud of? And then there is the dark window. At the exact time Lynette vanished, the Soulmate's satellite tracking, its digital heartbeat, flatlined. For 11 long hours, the boat simply stopped existing on the map. Now, in the middle of the ocean, you might blame a storm or a satellite glitch. But there was no solar flare. No other boat in the Abacos went dark that night, just the Soulmate. And this boat was a solar powerhouse. 600 watts of panels meant it didn't need a generator or shore power to stay online. The only way that system goes dark for 11 hours is if a human hand reaches out and flips the master switch to off. Why would a man who loves his wife turn off the tracking system the night she disappears? Unless he didn't want anyone to see where that boat was actually drifting or where it was being steered. But the most damning piece of hardware isn't the satellite, it's the dinghy. Brian told the police that Lynette bounced off the boat. But this wasn't some flimsy rubber raft. This was a Boss hard-bottom, rigid-hull boat. It's basically a floating piece of sidewalk. You don't bounce off it. You hit it or you fall over the side. Even more strange? Brian and Lynette had replaced the standard gas engine with a quiet electric outboard motor. If you've ever used an electric motor, you know they are nearly silent. If Lynette fell, there was no roar of a petrol engine to drown out her screams. It would have been quiet enough to hear a splash, a gasp, or a plea for help. Brian says the engine cut out because she was wearing the safety kill switch. But here is the forensic snag. On an electric motor of that size, a passenger wearing the kill switch is almost unheard of. It's a setup that feels designed for a specific outcome, a boat that accidentally stops the moment someone hits the water, leaving the survivor with a perfect excuse for why they couldn't immediately circle back. When the Royal Bahamas police force finally boarded the Soulmate, they didn't just find a grieving home. They found a man who seemed more interested in his equipment than his missing wife. Witnesses saw Brian returning to the boat with investigators, but before he went below deck, he was seen mucking around at the back of the boat. He was desperately trying to move an air conditioning unit to get to a hidden hatch. He told friends he was just breaking into his own boat, but to the officers watching him, it looked like a man trying to reach something before the law could get their hands on it. What was so important in that aft cabin that it couldn't wait? Was it a logbook? A second phone? Or was he trying to wipe the memory of the very electronics that were currently betraying him? Every phone, every GPS unit, and every networked sensor was seized. The FBI is now digging through the floating black box, looking for the moment the sailing hooker's love story turned into a maritime execution. They are looking for the mystery sailboat. Because the Coast Guard just went public with a desperate plea, they are hunting for a sailboat that was moored right next to the Soulmate the night Lynette vanished. A witness who might have heard what really happened during those 11 hours of darkness. Someone who saw if Lynette really bounced, or if she was pushed. If you want to understand why a man might turn off a GPS and watch his wife disappear into the dark, you don't look at the ocean. You look at the bank accounts. Lynette Hooker wasn't just a sailor. She was the bank. After decades at AT&T, she had built a fortress of a retirement fund, totaling over $650,000. She was the one who sold her home, her furniture, and her entire terrestrial life to fund the Soulmate. Brian? According to those close to the couple, his own 401k had been drained long ago. He was living on her dime, in her boat, in a dream that she was starting to wake up from. The perfect life documented on TikTok was a lie. Lynette's daughter Carly dropped a bombshell that changed everything. Lynette had a plane ticket booked for March 11th. She was supposed to leave Brian weeks before she disappeared. She had told family that things had become unbearable on the boat. This wasn't a happy retirement. It was a high-seas hostage situation. Carly even alleged a terrifying history of domestic abuse, claiming Brian had previously choked Lynette and threatened to throw her overboard. Now look at the timing. Lynette stays, the ticket goes unused, and 3 weeks later, she's gone. If Lynette left Brian, she would take her $650,000 with her. Brian would be left with a high-tech boat he couldn't afford to dock and no place to go. In the eyes of a prosecutor, that isn't just a coincidence, it's a financial execution. Brian told the world that his one job was to look out for her. But the police found court records from 2015 showing a much darker reality, a domestic dispute where Lynette had been struck in the forehead. They were a couple who knew how to hurt each other, but only one of them had the marine training to survive a night in the water. As investigators analyzed the Soulmate's master stateroom, they weren't just looking for DNA, they were looking for the signs of a struggle that the sailing hookers managed to keep off camera. The final act of this tragedy didn't play out on the waves, it played out in front of the world's cameras. On April 13th, Brian Hooker walked out of a Bahamian police station a free man, at least for the moment. Prosecutors had recommended no charges pending further investigation, a legal way of saying they didn't have the body, but they definitely had a suspect. Brian emerged looking emotional, tearfully telling reporters from NBC and ABC that he would never stop looking for his wife. He painted the picture of a devoted husband broken by a cruel ocean. But hours later, literally hours, the mask slipped. Despite telling the world that no authority could stop him from searching for Lynette, Brian boarded a plane and fled the Bahamas for the United States. His legal team claimed he had to leave because his mother was gravely ill. While that might be true, the timing was surgical. He left behind the Soulmate, the search parties, and the choppy waters where he claimed his wife was still fighting for her life. He traded the search for a lawyer's office in Michigan, retaining a high-powered criminal defense attorney to build a wall between himself and the truth. But Brian didn't account for the mystery sailboat. The United States Coast Guard Investigative Service, CGIS, has now gone public with a hunt for a specific vessel that was anchored right next to the Soulmate on that fateful Saturday night. Federal agents believe the owner of that boat saw something that doesn't align with Brian's 8-hour paddle. If that witness heard a scream before the tracking was cut or saw the Soulmate moving when Brian claimed to be drifting, the bounced story will evaporate. Today, Lynette Hooker is still missing. Her $650,000 retirement fund and her beautiful boat remain in a legal limbo, while her daughter Carly continues to scream for justice from the shore. Brian remains a person of interest, hiding behind legal statements in Michigan while the FBI meticulously reconstructs the digital fingerprints he tried to erase from the boat's network systems.